All right. Ooh, that was a live mic. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So if you want to go ahead and have a seat. Just want to thank you all for showing up. This is a lot more people than I expected. I apologize beforehand for all the ahs and ums. I am not a public speaker. This is my second time talking in public. So I'm a little bit nervous, but we'll work our way through it, okay? All right, so before we get started with anything, this is the forward-looking statement. There's a lot of verbiage up here. It's a long story short, don't go out and buy stock based off of the things I'm going to discuss today, okay? I'm not a financial advisor, and legally we're required to announce that. All right, so for the agenda today, we're going to talk about threat hunting with Splunk and CYBERCOM, so U.S. Cyber Command. So we're going to do a brief introduction. I'll explain about who I am. We'll go briefly over, without being too sales pitchy, what Splunk is, what Cosmic Array is, and then some of the capabilities that we currently have and that we're currently using to threat hunt adversaries within the DODIN. So my name is Brent Matlock. I am a senior solutions architect here at Splunk. I come from the Cyber Protection Brigade. I live here in Evans, Georgia. When I got out of the Army, I was tired of moving. I was in for 10 years. I did seven PCSs, and the last thing I wanted to do was move again. So I decided to stay here. Plus, that gave me the ability to kind of keep tying into the mission that I was leaving. I am all about security. Like I live and breathe security. So when I'm done, at 5 o'clock, when I'm checking out, I'm getting into my range, I'm attacking myself, I'm writing analytics, I'm trying to better myself, learn coding and things like that. And as far as being a solutions engineer, I basically cover all federal IC. So INSCOM, MCIA, DIA, CyberCom, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so what is Splunk? Quick hand count. Who here has used Splunk or at least heard of Splunk? Okay, that would probably have been a better question. Who hasn't heard of it? All right. So again, I'm going to try to not be so sales pitchy, things like that. But what is Splunk, right? It's important for you to know what Splunk is so that I can talk to the platforms and our solutions and our things like that. And so basically, long story short, very top level, we take any data, regardless of the structure, right? And we're giving the cyber protection teams the ability to react and take action on that data, right? So it's one thing to be able to collect the data. Anybody can collect the data, right? If I have files or PCAPs, like I can store those on a USB drive, I can store them anywhere, right? But Splunk is really taking that data and making it usable. So we are what we call the data to everything platform. Right, so we don't care if it's JSON, TSV, CSV, some homebrew output from a script or something like that. We're making that data usable so that, again, we can react and take action on that data, right? So CyberCom is leveraging Splunk to threat hunt adversaries within their environment to secure the DODIN. And really what I like to call, they're trying to enrich the data and get a conviction. Right, not necessarily like taking someone to court, like Matlock, right? But really to turn just like we do in the military decision-making process, right? We turn assumptions into facts, and so Splunk is able to do that by enriching the data, taking in and maybe taking data that you are just collecting for compliance purposes and actually turning that into something usable. Which brings us into our platform. So this is our area of operations and how we're providing the warfighter and helping with operational readiness, right? So we have the 3 phases. The middle here is the software as a service, right? SaaS. And essentially what that is a suite of tools. So it's Splunk, Enterprise Security, SOAR, the artist formerly known as Phantom, APT Falconer, which is something that I developed that we're going to talk about here, but it's really where the everyday user is logging in and providing analytics and doing detection, right, day-to-day operations. Then we have the next tier, which is the platform as a service. The platform as a service is the things that we're doing to do development to support and enrich the software as a service. So if we take SOAR for an example, right? Say I'm on a mission and I have an indicator, and I can't take that indicator and look at virus total, right? Because I'm not supposed to take things that I observe that could be malicious and add them to a public repository. That's why we have classified reporting procedures and things like that, right? So what we're doing, one of the solutions for that was we created a thing called RFI-CAT, Request for Information, right? So it says, hey, I found this IP address or this URL or a file hash, and I need you to look on high side to tell me if there's any additional reporting, any additional indicators that might provide context to why we're seeing this. And then if we're not seeing the additional indicators, then we can come back and say, well, it's probably a misconfiguration within the environment or, something like that. And then lastly, the infrastructure as a service. So we host Cosmic Array within Splunk GovCloud, so that we take care of all of the infrastructure. So it's one less thing for the cyber protection teams to have to do in order to conduct a mission. There's, for the cyber teams, the op tempo is crazy, right? You're supposed to get a green, amber, red phase. A lot of times because of the status of missions being pushed or things not working out or have to do a QRF, like things get moved all around. And so one of the last things that we want them to do is to have to spend time on standing up infrastructure, right? We really want them to do the analytics, to threat hunt. And so using Cosmic Array, we're able to kind of own that piece of the pie for them. This is just to talk about the types of clouds. So if you were kind of interested in having a discussion about this, not using Cosmic Array, but using something to yourself, we have the accreditations. We just got IL5 through DISA, so we do NIPRNet. A customer is sponsoring us for IL6, so we should have that hopefully soon within, I don't know, however long that takes. I'm not going to give a date. But we also do AWS, we do GPC, we do Splunk Cloud and FedRAMP as well. So now, what does all of that look like, right? So we have big data platform. I'm sure everybody here has heard of BDP, Gabriel Nibis, Gabriel Ruckus, or Caspian Pigeon. There's some kind of a data lake that the Army, or not Army, but DoD is really pushing for, right? To store and be able to triage the data, to be able to look for a nation state's campaign against multiple geographical areas. Because if I'm in Georgia conducting a mission, I only see what's happening in Georgia, right? Without some kind of a big data platform to simultaneously run a bunch of these missions, I can't correlate across a geographical space. I can't say, yeah, it looks like, APT 28 is over here and they're doing this phishing campaign, but also at the same time, they're doing it over in Europe, right? I wouldn't be able to see those unless I was collecting both sets of the data. And I can't physically collect both sets of data unless I split my team up and geographically do that. So we have the CNMF mission infrastructure, which is the kits, right? And they feed into Cosmic Array, and then Cosmic Array also ties back into the big data platform. And this is what we're calling inferior Splunk. So one of the things that CyberCom was really worried about was that access control, right? Throwing all of that data into a centralized location. If I throw it all Zeek logs into an index called Zeek, if I throw it all the Windows logs into a Windows bucket, how do I make sure that Brent can't search, John's data? And how do I make sure that John can't search my data if my customer doesn't want to be able to share that data, right? So we're doing what's called inferior Splunk, which essentially gives a one-time use authentication token, and I can take my data off of my kit and I can send it to the cloud stack, and We're taking it from index equals Windows to index equals mission name underscore Windows, right? So then I can apply role-based access control that says, if you were part of that mission, then you have access to it. If you were not part of that mission, then you cannot view that access until a higher echelon or an escalation is provided. So one of the questions and the major concerns that we had was, well, how do we deal with that data? Because a lot of the times, these teams are working non-domain joined, connected on the network, passively collecting and behind a firewall, right? Internet is not always an option for us, right? And so one of the things that we had to worry about was, well, how do we move this data that we're collecting, right? That's a pretty big piece of the pie. If we're collecting it here, how do I get it up into the cloud? So I developed two different capabilities. One of them is called Cloud Exporter. Cloud Exporter will take Splunk data, or any data that rides within Splunk, and it will export it and send it to an S3 bucket so that it can directly ingest it by BDP, right? Or if there's another Elastic instance or another Splunk instance, it'll go Splunk to Splunk. So we're able to move that data now. It's multi-threaded. It's got checksum delivery, so if it sends 10 packets, I get 10 verifications back, and I checksum those. If 2 of the events were, for whatever reason, not delivered out of the 10, that gets put into a ledger, and we retry those 2 events until we're done. We do not stop sending the data until we are 100% acknowledged on both sides that that was sent and received. And then the last one, I think it's funny, it's called What the Heck. So Heck is a HTTP event collector. It's a Splunk. Just think of it as an API call. It's a JSON payload that gets moved with curl or requests if you're a coder. It essentially is a payload that gets manipulated and then pushed and received at another Splunk instance. So this would be from Kit to the cloud. So we're in situations where we go and conduct a mission. If we're out there for 6 weeks conducting a mission, typically what happens is we come back and we have to get a snowball. We got to offload that data. We got to ship the snowball so that it can be put into the BDP, and that takes 3 to 6 weeks to get done. So I'm 3 to 6 weeks without data. This we can send instantaneously. There's no need for a snowball anymore. So all we need is a pipe to be able to send, and at scale, I've tested up to 1 terabyte a day. So this is a very good thing, and it's been saving them money, and it gives them the ability to both collect, if they wanted to collect for a local mission, it gives them that ability to do so. But if they wanted to just collect all the data, interface with the customer, and then, hey, once we do a final analysis or whatever, we'll let you know for the mission report, right? They can come back stateside, send off their data, ship it directly from Kit to Splunk or from Kit to BDP, and conduct the mission analysis that they need to. So we're really enabling them for mission and operational success. And then one of the last capabilities that we wanted to talk about is APT Falconer. So APT Falconer was kind of a passion project of mine. Like I said before, I served down here on the teams, and one of the things that I had a hard time with was the ability to share data and analytics with my other teammates, right? So I was on CPT 401, so my sister team was CPT 400, and the way that they collected data, the way that they operated was, even though it was a wheel, like their wheel looked completely different than mine, right? So I was only able to assist by saying, hey, this is kind of what I'm looking for. And then they would have to take the time to go back into the thought process of reiterating and making their own analytics, which is really bad, because then the only people that I'm helping and bettering the mission is myself, right? No one else can reap those benefits. So APT Falconer is a way to get all of that data to look the same, so that I'm a force multiplier instead of just bettering myself. So I go and I conduct a mission, I come up with 5 analytics. I can directly share those analytics one-to-one because your data is going to look like my data, regardless of how you collect it. And so APT Falconer does that. It's Common Information Model compliant. So regardless of the network traffic that gets captured, it's referenced as source IP. Doesn't care if it comes from a firewall, a switch, PCAP, it doesn't matter. It's all referenced the same across the board. It becomes the centralized location for the things that they're doing, right? So triaging of the data, looking at the alerts that they're doing, they're hunting, they're providing additional details, they're enriching the data, and they're also providing a situational awareness for the leaders, right? So leaders have a play in this as well. And last thing is, there's something in here for everybody. So cyber protection teams are based off of 3 roles, right? And those 3 roles, there's more than 3 roles, but there's 3 main ones. How about we say that for better verbiage? Network analyst, right? So network analyst is going to be looking at those firewalls, the switches, the routers, the PCAPs, and things like that. Then we have the host analyst, right? The host analyst is going to be looking at audit logs, authentication logs, endpoint logs, things like that. And then lastly, it's your intel analyst. I apologize if anyone here is an intel analyst, but I'm going to be blunt for a second. Intel analysts outside of MDMP and outside of post-mission report, they were useless. Like they just ate up TDY, right? Because, and it's no fault of their own, but they don't have the technical ability and they don't have the time to learn a tool to play around and hunt and provide some benefit, right? They know the diamond model, they know the MDMP, they know the CCIRs and all that stuff, but technical ability and the ability to read a report and then hunt was null. With APT Falconer, we kind of changed that. So network analysts, like I said, I've created workspaces based off of these roles. So APT Falconer has, I think it's up to 42 different dashboards. We cover every protocol that Zeek offers, Cisco, we Palo Alto, and we take all of those analytics and it's a point and click. So if you look at any of these dashboards, there's no need to be able to learn and spend the time to learn the Splunk processing language in order to use this and to find bad guys. And what that means is that it's a faster adoption for CyberCom, right? So because of the turnover rate, they're finding a lot of success in being able to give these guys and gals the ability to search right off the bat without really having to learn the tool, right? And because Splunk is schema at read, which means that we can change the flow without having to re-index it. We can change it on the fly. We can make any data usable, map it to APT Falconer, and then a user just sits and points and clicks and looks for anomalies. The host side of the house, admittingly, I was a host analyst, right? So this is where the bread and butter for APT Falconer comes into play. I don't know a whole lot about networking side of the house. I know the buzzwords and that things talk to each other. That's about it. The host side of the house is, again, it's an individual workspace tied to that work role, but it is mapped to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So all of the techniques and tactics that are in up to MITRE ATT&CK Framework 11, which is the latest version, we have about 80% of that I've mapped out and I've vetted myself. So I have red teamers, and this is going to sound nerdy, but that's what we do for fun. We get in Discord, and after hours, after work, they attack my stuff, and we do some purple teaming. And so all of the stuff has been validated. Like I said, we got about 86% of some of the stuff you just can't map, like war driving and things like that, right? So we'll never be fully 100%. But what we've done with those analytics is now that we've taken tactics and techniques and mapped them to our events for our detections, we heat map those. So I have a breakdown of all of the environment over the last X amount of time, and I can see how many techniques and tactics I've observed within my environment. that will give me the ability to do a trend to look and say, hey, based off of what I'm seeing, this looks like it's APT 28 or 29, right? And so then, and we're going to get to it in a second, but then I can start having my intel play. And so intel, they kind of had a joke when I was in the Army, again, almost 3 years ago. It was intel drives operations. Well, now we're kind of making that a reality for CyberCom, right? CyberCom is actually letting the intel drive the operations. And dynamically with the ebbs and flows of hunt, right, and detect, we're able to kind of sift and maneuver as we need to and be dynamic with the heat map. The heat map was a huge thing for us, and it seemed so simple, but having a chart that says, hey, look, not only are these the detections that you're seeing, but this is what that logical flow looked like. The initial access was a phishing email. The execution was PowerShell. The command and control is registry exploitation, right? We're able to physically look at those detections now and paint that peer view. I know I said I'm only talking about current events, like current capabilities, so we're doing this today. But one of the things that I'm working on now with one of the national mission teams is working and building in the Army schema maneuver so that I can have a drag and drop that says, hey, I'm looking for this threat group, I'm looking for this tactic, and I'm looking for this technique. Do I have analytics? Yes. Try it out. Does it prevent it? Does it give you events? No. Okay, it's a logic flow. And then if I can try that twice and I get no results, then I can put in a support ticket that says, hey, I need an analytic for this to be able to detect lateral movement from APT 41. We're working that in, which is kind of cool. So that was the only thing that I've talked about today that we're not currently doing as we speak. So when I mentioned the heat map, and the heat map giving me most likely threat actor or most likely software within my environment, right? This is where intel comes into play. So a lot of you already know there's reporting, right? There's indicators of compromise that we're looking for that you're not going to find on Alien Vault, that you're not going to find on FireEye or CrowdStrike, right? There's classified reportings that you can look at that Intel have access to. So now Intel, you say, hey, looks, based off of what we're seeing in our alerting and our trends, it looks like it's APT 28. What else do you have for us? So it's a very simple approach, but it's drag and drop. They can take the drag and drop and select the type of indicator that they're looking for that they're reading from a report. They say, hey, I'm reading this report, and it has an IP address in it. So I select IP, then I fill in the blank. And the Intel analysts are actually going out there and hopefully looking for indicators, and they're not getting results back. But should they get results back, now they're able to help drive the operation and give something that, hey, like, you're not chasing rabbits that you might think are malicious. We're looking for indicators of compromise. We have something to back up the class, to tie that to the original data source. And this should be looked onto, right? So Intel is driving operations for CyberCom and helping the cyber teams not chase as many rabbits, which is very good. Now, the cool thing that one of the teammates came back to me and told me was like, hey, if I search for that IP address today, then it doesn't help me tomorrow. So tomorrow, do I have to come and look at that IP address? It's like, well, yeah, that's kind of silly, right? You just search the same IP every day. So what I've built into this dashboard here is you'll see this green button down here, and this is a push indicator to CSV, and so it's a lookup. So the Intel went from not doing anything at all to building a dynamic threat feed with zero Splunk knowledge, point, click, fill in the blank. They're driving operations now, right? And they're helping. And so a lot of the Intel analysts over at CyberCom are like, hey, it's cool. Like, I really get to play around. Like, I still got to do the MDMP and the PDSS and things like that, but I get to play with the toys finally, which is kind of cool. So So yeah, it doesn't have to be a one-by-one. So if they wanted to have a CSV with indicators of compromise, they can take it, they can upload that. So you're not looking. Who remembers Log4Shell, which is not too long ago, right? That was a pretty big exploit, or SolarWinds. If you're out on mission and I don't have internet connectivity, what do? I just cross my fingers and hope that I don't see anything like that? Or I can have Intel go and read these threat reports and build a dynamic threat feed, right? So they're able to aid and help and get all of that stuff really good, which is nice. And this list is continuously expanding, so there are other indicators that they're asking for that we're implementing and things like that. And then lastly, this is being used by them, CYBERCOM, for leadership, right? So one of the worst things that I think that we can do, I'm speaking to the leaders now, and I'm a little guilty myself, but one of the worst things I think that we could do is kind of interrupt while someone is chasing that rabbit, right? While they're 6 or 7 queries from one thing looking for another, and we walk by and we say, hey, how's Splunk doing? Right? And you completely snap that focus. So what we did was we created a single pane of glass called the leadership dashboard that I can throw up on a monitor. I can give access to the leadership, and they can actually log in and look and see the status of the kit, the infrastructure, the services that ride on the infrastructure, and the Splunk stuff that they're doing as well, right? So they have the ability to see full scope, top to bottom, and it's very easy to understand. So easy that it's either red or green, right? Red is bad. So, but if it's green, then you know that you don't have to bother anybody, right? You can let them continue to do their operations, taking their notes, kind of collaborating and not break that thought process. And again, I'm guilty of that myself, right? I want to know now, so I walk up and ask people, and then I've talked to my junior and my junior soldiers, and was like, well, you were like knee deep in it. What happened? He's like, I lost it. Like, forgot where I was going with that one because I had to look up how many IP addresses were in the CIDR or whatever, right? So we're, again, at the top, we're looking at the processes and services that Splunk is running itself, right? So we're making sure that data ingest is being good. We're making sure that all of the indexes that we have are continuously receiving data. If one of those indexes, say the Windows events, if it stops receiving events, then we'll be notified on this simple panel, right? Then I can let my admin know that, hey, you stopped receiving Windows events. Over here in the middle on the left-hand side, this was an ask from one of the teams. This is the services that are running on their security onion sensor. So they're looking at NetSniff, NG, Barnyard, Zeek, Suricata, making sure that those services are flowing so that if I stop getting network traffic, I can spend time trying to hunt around and play around with the VM, or I can look at the dashboard and it'll tell me exactly what process has stopped, right? So it's, again, going back to the centralized location that they had asked for. The middle on the right is going to be your peaks and valleys for data ingest by source type. And then at the bottom, it's again, how many searches are being ran within your environment, so you can actually see the tempo of what your soldiers are doing, right? Are there no searches going on? Like, so now they're just pretending that I came out of my office. Now they're pretending, right? So, and then the middle one down there at the bottom is the packet loss. So I can actually look at peaks and valleys for traffic flow loss coming into my environment. From maybe one of the biggest things that we notice is like in a distributed security onion environment, you know, if you go out with 3 sensors, but you're getting a terabyte of PCAP a day that you're trying to sift through, you should probably put some more nodes out there, right? So looking at the data loss, we're able to, hey, we should probably expand, set up our infrastructure a little better, et cetera, et cetera. And then lastly, this is one of the, I think the most important, I think the leadership will really appreciate this, but it's what we're calling the commander's view. So we've given a new job to CYBERCOM for their hunt, right? And that's to the Intel Analyst. So the Intel Analyst can actually play with the toys. But what if I told you that we can have everybody within the chain of command all the way up to General Nakasone logging in and using Splunk, right? Seems pretty far-fetched and crazy, but we have the ability to do that. So at the very bottom here, we have in the Garrison data platform, we have the CPT kits, we have the regional cyber centers. They're all feeding into Cosmic Array, right, or BDP, to perform additional analytics. The nice part about being able to do that from a centralized, putting all that data into a centralized location is I no longer have to spend money on sending the entire team out there to go do TDY. Send 2 to 3 light bodies, 2 to 3 officers to interact with the customer, shake babies, kiss hands. Nobody? No. And then I can keep the rest of my team back here. It's beneficial because now they're getting more hours on keyboard and you're working the same hours alongside the resources that you needed to reach out to anyway, right? So if I have a request for information and I'm over in Europe is 9 hours difference, I gotta send a request, I get off for the day, someone else is coming in, they fulfill the request, and I can get it the next day, right? So it's at least a 24-hour turnaround for one request. If I have multiple requests, then it takes even longer. If I have 3 or 4 Joes that are forward that are managing the kit and collecting data locally, I'm able to perform 24-hour operations back here stateside. Right? So I have a longer coverage, and operationally, my readiness is doubled, right? Because now I don't have to worry about taking all those people paying for TDY and all of that stuff. So they're using it to extend the hours of operation, because if the customer is leaving at 5 that we're conducting a mission on, then we leave at 5, right? And if 5 o'clock over there is only, 4 o'clock in the morning here? Like, nobody's here. So we're able to leverage this and use 24-hour operations. The data that we're collecting from the kit, putting into the cloud stack, we're also adding metadata to it. So we're adding a point of contact. We're adding a mission name. We're adding a team name, geographical region, right? That type of stuff. So what does that do for me? Well, that's where the 3 and 4-star commands and below come into play. So Netcom, right? They're chilling, and they're the tier 2 service provider for Cosmic Array or BDP. So I'm conducting a mission. I only look at my data, but their SOC analysts are able to look at all of the geographical space for all the data that we've collected to find those campaigns that we were looking for, right? Then at the 4-star level, General Nakasone has an asset inventory now because we've tagged all of the data. So he can see who he has physically conducting a mission, how long they've been on mission, some of the metrics that they've got, right? He has a full scope from being able to observe what his troops are doing. But he also, on the flip side of that, is he has the pawns to move around for QRF, to do green cycle for training, and to help with the readiness of the force, right? He also can look at things like workload, right? Like, why is this one team 6 missions this year, and there's 2 teams with no missions? Like, what is going on there, right? It helps him make the informed decision of what's going on with his troops. All of this stuff that we've talked about really comes down to sense, understand, decide, and act, right? It's one thing to just collect logs. Anybody can collect logs, like I said at the beginning. But what we're doing, and the way that CYBERCOM is using Splunk, is to hunt, to find assumptions, turn assumptions to facts, and then act on those facts. So my closing thoughts, right? Some of the things that we're doing here at Splunk to help, not only how is CYBERCOM using Splunk, but Splunk is leveraging CYBERCOM. And so some of the ways that we're doing that is we're helping with operational readiness, right? We're making sure that regardless of the experience, right, a methodology is something that you can't really learn from a book, right? It's something that you either have or you don't have. So with that, there's an innate lack of knowledge or skill between individuals, right? It's no fault of our own. Some people get it, some people don't get it, some people get it later, right? And so what we're doing is we're helping raise that floor by requiring point and click, right? With providing drop-down menus on the panel that say, hey, look, if I'm looking at technique 1058, which is PowerShell, why are events in this block important? Why should I care, right? We're providing that stuff to aid in the hunt. And it's all offline. It's built into the platform APT Falconer. Last thing is we're leveraging them by just having a direct line of communication. All of the capabilities that I've talked to you today, they've all came at the request from a user. I haven't done really anything on my own, right? Hey, we don't have the ability to heat map, right? We like that you did MITRE ATT&CK framework, but we don't really have a way to heat map that. How do we visualize that? So then they come back and we're building that for them. One of the things that we're doing is we're changing the workshops. So if you've done any of the online training, you know that it's like financial data doesn't really help things stick for me, right? I know how to make a chart on how much product I've sold over the last 7 days, but that doesn't help me learn how to create a dashboard for new service accounts that were created and only existed for 24 hours and then were deleted, right? So we've built custom Splunk shop workshops that we're kind of, I guess, touring the states, if you will. At the end of this month, we're going down to San Antonio to do another 3-day session with the cyber teams out there. But and then we're proven success. So when I say APT Falconer goes out, and this is a humble brag, when I say that it does all of the things that it does, the very first time that we actually took it out in the wild and used it, we found 2 Russian nation-state malwares, never found before, within 3 hours. It was super quick. So it was humble brag because it was like, yeah, like I said it did that. Like, whew, of course I knew that, right? But then, so we're proving success. We're helping with operational readiness. And lastly, we have an open line of communications. We have a CPT, Cyber Protection Team, Slack, that we use with CYBERCOM. We use Signal if there's any kind of operational talks that need to happen. We're showing up on sites. We're going down to the Georgia Cyber Center. Next week I'll be there building out a kit for an upcoming mission, right? We're really involved in helping enable these teams. And so because at the end of the day, they were the ones that are responsible for cleaning out our environments, right? So the least that we can do is enable them the best we can. And with that, I'm going to break it down for questions. Shoot.
I heard you say earlier, RBAC.
Yes.
Is it able to look at any attribute set source and do ABAC? Based access control?
Yeah, so the question was, for RBAC, are we able to do ABAC? So we can break down things as granular or as broad as you want. Everything within Splunk is a knowledge object, which means that it has innate permissions. And that is completely independent of what Active Directory has or any kind of ADP, right, identity provider. So if I say, hey, Brent logs on, he's CPT-01, he's Mission Alpha, he was in Germany, right? I can break down the knowledge objects on base of those 3 indicators. Or I can just say, hey, he was off of 1, so he can search all of the indexes that start with CPT-1. Does that make sense? We can go down to even within the fields of data, we can scrub them. So if you have FISA data, and I want to look at the underlying data because I'm looking at security stuff, but I don't want to be able to look at like HR data. But I should probably be able to look at their somewhat. If I don't have the specific roles, I can replace social security numbers on the fly with all X's that only I see, but if you log on and you have the FISA tag, you can see the security number. Does that answer your question, sir? Awesome. Yes?
You talked a whole lot about this thing called BDP, but you didn't really describe too much of it. Is that a Splunk capability?
So BDP is not a Splunk capability. It is something that I believe our cyber is working towards. It's a big data platform. Think of it as a centralized location similar to what we're doing, The only difference is that it runs with Elastic. That's essentially the same thing. Shoot.
When you said your common information model, is that interoperable with the unified platform Elastic Common Schema, or is that sort of replace CCS?
Yeah, so as far as raw data goes, right, as long as we're not receiving the data specifically directly from Logstash where the originating raw has been manipulated, then it doesn't matter for us. We do have the ability on the fly, though, to interact with Schema 1, which I think is what you're alluding to, or ECS. We have apps that are built for that, so we can query Elastic directly from Splunk if we wanted to, as long as we have the credentials. And then vice versa, right? They would just have to query the raw because we still store the raw unadulterated, if you will, right? We don't change the XML or the JSON or the TSV from the raw. We just parse at search time. The only thing our indexers care about is where's the beginning of an event, where's the end of an event, and where's the timestamp, so I can put it in a right chronological order. Does that answer your question? Okay. Anything else?
You talked about a little bit the common operational picture.
Yes.
I was just curious, is that a logical model or a geographic-based model, or do you go back and forth between the two?
So we're talking about this, correct? For the current operational model. So it depends on how we want to look at it, right? So obviously General Nakasone is not currently doing this. That would be a future capability. But if he would, then we could do a real-time geographical or geospatial or an inventory, right? It really depends on what method works for him. Some people like graphs and charts. Me, I'm a boring guy. I just want a table, right? I just want to be able to, I take 50 events and I only want to see the 3 that mean anything to me. And then if I wanted to see the other 47 fields, I can drill down into it. Does that answer your question? Yeah. And so I think that capability is similar to, I'm probably going to get some hate, but like Ike, PlanX, FlanX, yeah. Shoot.
APT Falconer. I know you said you and your buddies are doing programming the dashboards, so it's more AI. Do you have any ML capabilities for new APTs that arise?
Yes, sir. So the question was for APT Falconer and correct me if I'm wrong, is it using AI, and is there any expandability for future APTs?
So right now, because you're programming it in, it's AI.
Mhm.
They're doing a run, based off of known data.
So
Talking about unknown new APTs.
yeah, so what we're doing is we're actually not looking for signature-based detections, right? So a signature-based would be, I'm looking for mimikatz.exe to interact with LSAS. Instead, from a technique or a tactic approach, I'm looking for anything doing a dump on LSAS. Anything that isn't nts.det, when log on, there's certain programs that are natively that I can't stop it from touching, but we're looking for behavioral. And so that's where some of the AI that I've worked in comes through using machine learning. So I can filter out 95% of the data because it's all normal, right? It's observed a million times during the day. We can kind of ignore it. But then as far as working in additional threat playbooks, I would say probably playbooks, right? Is probably a better. We're constantly expanding, right? There's no way that, especially myself, who's done 96% of this work by myself, I don't know everything, right? So that's where the teams come into play. That's where the detections during mission and the sharing of the data and the force multiplying, that's where all of you as users would come into play. So that's where CYBERCOM is really helping me by giving me the requirements that they need and then building upon those requirements themselves. So we definitely can expand for additional, but we can also, not only APTs, but we can also expand for techniques and tactics just like MITRE does. Sir, in the back.
That question to expand on that aspect, because it seems like a lot of tools these days are more static in nature when it comes to enriching their knowledge, like Sticks 2.1.
Yep.
It seems like what you're talking about could actually be more on the front end to dynamically update and manage your knowledge
Yeah, and so it's all search macros, it's all dynamic lookups and things that power those detections. So as a baseline, we do have searching and reporting. I basically took enterprise security, reworked it, revamped it to where instead of being able to turn on like 20 and then the instance goes red, I can turn on all 700. So my instance at home that's running on 8 gigs of RAM has 700 correlation searches running with no issues. And it's 8 gigs of RAM, which is not even the minimum requirements. AV CPU is 8 gigs of RAM because I'm poor, I don't have a lot of overhead. But we basically have taken the analytics, the front end, and made it dynamic so that regardless of how your environment is kind of set up, it still manipulates and projects the data to the common information model. It doesn't, I don't care if Windows events are stored in an index called Windows or event logs or whatever, right? We just change the search macro and then it can look for those analytics in those containers. Any other questions? Shoot.
Your original use case of looking up an indicator on the high stack gang or fallback, is that Splunk doing that? Is that BDP doing that? Or is that an alternative solution that's doing that for the eye? Because you presented that Splunk was only on the
So those additional indicators would come from the Intel analyst playing their role. So it wouldn't be a Splunk-ism. Does that make sense? That would be physically the Intel analyst sitting in and working. So we have the ability to tie into high. Correct me if I'm wrong, John, but we just don't currently do that. We let the Intel analyst, honestly, we can automate it, wouldn't be an issue. They've enjoyed being able to play with the toys and that's what they do, right? They read the reporting. So if I had access to read a report, I was a host analyst, I wouldn't know the first thing. I would just run through and blindly look for indicators of compromise, right? Just be like Googling Alien Vault. I wouldn't have any idea what I'm looking at. So if the Intel analysts wanted to automate that process, then they could definitely work with us to get that done. Any other questions? I thought I seen a hand over here somewhere. Shoot.
Do you have CyberCom shares their dashboard templates for tactical units to use in their own environments?
That's a good question. The question was, do I know if CyberCom is sharing any of their dashboarding and analytics, correct? Not that I'm tracking, but if you stay after, I can get your information and I can see if I can put you in contact with a person that should be able to, or I can give you a copy of APT Falconer. Yeah. Shoot. No, you're fine.
So APT Falconer, I'm just curious, is it free to try? How does it work? Is it free on Dev?
Yeah, so APT Falconer is not, it's not available on Splunk base. But it's also not like a premium product. So it is free. It's just not available to the public. But if you have the right accesses, then we can get it to you. We can get it to you. I have a full wiki. It's hosted on my own internal GitLab. So I restrict the access to who can get to it and who can't. And that's just because that's where the cyber teams are posting their issues, and the issues are being additional analytics that they want to look into. And so I kind of keep that locked down the best that I can so that the community is safe, if that makes sense. But if you would like a copy of APT Falconer, I can provide an offline copy and the documentation for it. Any other questions? Sweet. Well, if nobody else has anything else, I'm going to give you back some time. Thank you all for attending, and I'll be up here if you have any questions and you want to talk offline. Thank you. guys got any questions?
She flipped the hat.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
She flipped the hat.